Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules, and at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. Very excited about tonight's program. It's a return, a long overdue return, I suppose you could say, but he was on last year, so he's one of the few folks we've had doubled up on The Revival so far, and one of the reasons why is because I'm just a huge fan. I'm just a huge fan of our guest, Fred Andersson. We had a fantastic conversation last year about his book, Northern Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden. He's very prolific on social media, and I'm online all day, so I'm on social media all the time. And he's always posting interesting things. We've had some really fun and enlightening interactions over the past year since he was on BOA. And, as I was sitting around thinking about who to have on the show, I remember actually you had posted something. We'll get into it later. And I'm like, I got to get Fred back on the show. We're always kind of crossing paths on these different things that he's looking at or stuff that he's talking about. And I'm always on the edge of my seat, that sounds awesome. So I'm like, let's get Fred back on Binnall of America. So with all that said, welcome back to the show, Fred Andersson. Really looking forward to this, brother.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. I'm very happy to be back here. I've been looking forward for the call. I've been waiting. I've been sitting here in my chamber waiting it's great fun. The last episode I was on was about my book, and I remember I was talking so much about my book during a couple of months, so it's, when I'm looking back at it now, it's kind of like a blur, right. It was like too much. No, it wasn't too much, but it was like,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I'm happy to be back and talk about other things, actually. So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, what I always tell folks, especially if the first time guest and they have a book or something, I'm like, at the end of the show, I'm always just like, well, that's, hopefully we can get you back on because, we just did sort of the greatest hits from the book. You always kind of got to hit the person's main things. So then it's like, well, we get you back, then we can really get into the nitty gritty. And here we are today. We're about to do so. We'll start out, I guess, to sort of as a follow-up to our last conversation, though. At the time, you had the book that had come out, and you were working on a TV special for Swedish television, and it was set to come out later in 2024. It has since aired. So talk a little bit about that experience and how it was received.
Yeah, it was a 4-part documentary series about UFO phenomenon, both in Sweden and internationally. So we did it for TV4, which is a big TV channel, and the host was Felix Herngren, who is, the general public knows him as a director and comedian, but he also has a very deep interest in UFOs, but maybe more focusing on the 2017, the UAP stuff and everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I came into that project and I did a huge mind map. Here we have your UAP thing in the middle, and then you have this, hundreds, so many different side subjects and interesting personalities and parts of the phenomenon and the culture. So we did 4 episodes, and they went on the air during the spring. It did well. We are a small country. At the moment, we have 10 million people, and I think each episode had about 500,000 viewers, which is very, very good in Sweden, I must say. And we also noticed that there's been a lot of talk about it, and people understood finally that there is more to all of this than Pentagon videos. There's a lot more. So I'm super proud of what we did. And I mean, currently I'm working with another television project, another four-parter actually, kind of like a Swedish version of the BBC documentary series Uncanny, which is to me a great investigative paranormal TV series where we do deep research and really tell the stories. No silly ghost hunting equipments or psychic mediums or stuff like that. It's more like a journalistic approach.
Right.
So that's what I'm working with now. So I've had the beginning of last year and the beginning of this year has been great. In the middle, it's been shit, to be honest. But it's been insane. But it's nice to start the year with something fun.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Yeah.
But I tend to, for those. I mean, I mentioned this everywhere on social media. But the reason why a huge chunk of last year was shit is because my mother passed away, and that came as a shock, and all that. Those things around it kind of just sucked energy from me. Of course, I wanted to spend every moment with her, and but today I was talking with someone about it who I met in town, and I realized that last year was for me kind of like the card, the tower in the tarot. To build something new, something needs to be destroyed first. It needs to crumble, and then you build it up. So I kind of feel it's like that. I'm trying to be a little bit positive, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, my heart goes out to you, man. I didn't want to bring this up on the air, but you did. So yeah, I mean, my condolences, and you were talking about it a lot on social media, and it was heartwarming and heart wrenching at the same time. It was like, I really felt for you. I remember I reached out to you a few times, just like it was quite. I don't know if I would have the wherewithal to share all that with everyone, but you did, and it was beautiful. It really was.
Thank you. For me, it was it was my way to deal with it, to process so I'm still, you don't see that, but the whole apartment is filled with bags of my paper bags of my mom's writings, because when I went through her apartment, she had written down so much, biographical texts, poems, articles, stuff she never did something with. So I kind of feel she left it for me. So one day I will go through all of that, and that's the next part of the process, to deal with mom. So, but that's how it is.
Yeah. We'll pivot to something that well, we'll probably get into this later, but yeah, you left Twitter, so I lost the thread where you had mentioned this. So I had to luckily it was on your blog, and folks can find your stuff at Fred Andersson, 2 S's in the Andersson.se. So fredandersson.se. And luckily I was like, oh shit, what was that? What was this conspiracy thing that we had talked about? And then I had found it, and and forgive me if I mispronounce the name, Olof Palme was the Prime Minister of Sweden who was assassinated. And you had mentioned in passing, I guess I don't know if you had written the blog piece or after. I think maybe it was after, because you had kind of just mentioned it in passing. It was like, I should write something about this. And it's like it is got these conspiracy theories attached to it, which is really fascinating to me, because I'm only steeped in sort of the American conspiracy theories and maybe some tangential British ones, if you will, but barely any. There's conspiracies in every country, and most people don't even know about them. And this one is Sweden. This is a pretty big one, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Prime Minister Olof Palme was assassinated in 1986, February 28th, by an unknown assailant. What looked like a lone gunman, basically. Maybe you don't know this, but you know that the Palme investigation is the largest murder investigation ever. It's way bigger than the JFK thing and all of that. I mean, the Palme it's so huge. I mean, it's insane. And probably it would have been a lot smaller if they just had done it correctly from the beginning. Do a proper investigation on the scene of the murder and follow the leads directly. Instead, they went out on a wild goose chase, following. They had this idea it was the Kurds, the what do you say in English? The Kurds from Turkey, and which had absolutely no basis in reality at all. So of course, this threw things off seriously. So since 1996, there's been countless of conspiracy theories and other kind of theories, and it's been smashed over the head over and over again with books and articles and documentary. It's huge.
They never caught anyone. They never caught the assassin.
Well, no. They arrested a guy, Christer Pettersson, during the late 80s, and he was actually convicted for the murder. But like a couple of months later, he was acquitted because it was bizarre. Christer was an alcoholic and drug addict, one of the guys walking around in Stockholm. He was a famous face. You saw him in town.
Okay.
He loved Palme, first of all, and I mean there was no evidence at all, except that somehow he ended up in one of those, what do you say, this where you put people in line and you're going to identify.
Like a lineup. Or like a picture lineup, one or the other.
Yeah. And someone mentioned to Palme's wife that they had brought in an alcoholic. So she stands there looking at 10 people, 9 cops and 1 alcoholic, and you can clearly see who's an alcoholic, of course. I mean, you have the look. So she identified him. That's it, basically. There's nothing more to it. And since then, they haven't... I mean, there's been so many theories. I actually wrote down a bunch here very shortly. I don't know everything about everything here, but you had the Yugoslavian hired assassin theory. You had the 33-year-old lone right-wing madman theory. The crazed drunk, of course, that's Christer I mentioned. The South African apartheid assassin. The Indian Bofors connection is about a weapons deal there. The police conspiracy, of course. CIA P2 conspiracy.
Oh, yeah.
One that was popular for a number of years was mistaken for a drug lord theory, because he had a kind of similar look as a famous drug lord who lived in the neighborhood. So people thought maybe they were out to kill that drug lord, but they shot Palme instead. I don't know. I mean,
was he just like walking down the street by himself? Like, this was because like when you hear like assassin, I always think of like these, it happens in a crowd of people or whatever. This was like him just by himself.
Yeah, that's kind of, I would say, the real mystery in it, how that happened. Palme and his wife decided in the last moment to go to the cinema to watch a Swedish drama. And they called their son, and we're talking, 30, 45 minutes before they left home. Then they knew, okay, we're going to go to that cinema and watch that movie. They had been talking about going to another cinema and watch another movie a couple of hours earlier. But this decision was really... they were the only ones who knew about this.
Right.
There's no like in the newspapers or office or anything. They knew about it. So he and his wife took the subway. This is Sweden, so the prime minister can take the subway without, at the time at least. Took the subway, they watched the movie, they went out from the cinema, said goodbye to their son and his wife, and they walked along Sveavägen in the middle of Stockholm. This was a Friday night. Lots of people around.
Okay.
They crossed the street to look at a window. They did some window shopping. And just when they came to Tunnelgatan, the tunnel street, a guy shows up behind them and shoots Olof Palme. I think it's twice, and one of the bullets hits even his wife there. And then the assassin runs up a couple of stairs and disappears. And you have witnesses everywhere. There's tons of witnesses, all around.
But it just happens in like a blink of an eye. So it's
yeah. So exactly. So it's like, the assassin used Magnum 357, I think it's called. This big piece, and it was quite close. The shot came, and the assassin, to several witnesses, he looked a bit clumsy. Like he wasn't super fit or anything like that.
Yeah.
So in many ways, it feels like, someone saw him, took the chance and shot him. But then again, who walks around with this gun? Did this guy follow them from their home? No one saw anyone follow them. It's kind of just a mystery how the killer and Palme ended up at the same spot, basically. Yeah, I mean, it's been tons of stuff. Sorry.
I'm sure I'm not the first to suggest this. What about the wife? Have people implicated her in this?
Oh yeah, of course they have. They think she planned it as some kind of revenge thing. There was this rumor that Palme was gay, and he had some affairs. He wasn't gay, but he had affairs. Shirley MacLaine, the actress, was one. It's quite well known. It wasn't that much of a secret. So they thought that Lisbeth, his wife, wanted revenge on him to doing like this. A more wilder twist on this is once again going back to that if Palme was gay, he had gotten AIDS and he wanted to fake his own death. Wow. So he could fly out of Sweden in a private, jet plane and hide somewhere. Yeah, that's, of course, there's...
It is wild. See, this is like, this is crazy. This is like shit. I'm like a true crime enthusiast buff, so I love these ones that have all these crazy theories. This is wild. Holy shit, yeah. Don't discount the Sun either, folks. The Sun could be in on it too. I don't know. Wild, yeah.
No, so there's really... there's a lot of mysteries. I mentioned the 33-year-old lone right-wing madman, Victor Gunnarsson. He was seriously suspect for a while. But he got acquitted and he moved to the United States where he got murdered.
Woo. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
So it's but there's so much, and there's
stories, weird mysteries like this. Yeah, they beget weirder mysteries. Like as you dig into the details, you find more and more it's like puzzle pieces that are all round. It's like none of this makes any sense. This is wild. Yeah.
But I think I think the solution to the murder is, you have to go back to the first day, basically, the first evening, and look at the facts there. And actually, I'm not saying this is the solution, but last year, this thin book came out, which it's called The Last Book About the Murder of Olof Palme. So it's a bit quite cocky title. The last book, yeah.
Okay.
And it presents a guy named Christer as the killer. And they just goes through the facts. He owned the correct kind of gun. He lived nearby. He hated Palme. He, like many other people, murderers, not assassins, he got back to the scene of the crime days later, lurking around. He was I think it was in 2008, the police visited him. They got home to his house, to his apartment. They knocked on the door and they said, "This is the police, open," and then he shot himself directly, for example. So it's... Jesus. Some people are very, very convinced.
Strange, yeah. Again, strange deaths. You always find more. Once you get into one famous death, you get into it more. You're like, A lot of people are dying in strange ways, similar to JFK.
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
This is fascinating. Yeah,
yeah, it's a good mystery, you know. I mean, I was just a kid. I think I was 8 or 9 years old when this happened. So, I mean, for me, it was like, oh, he's this famous guy that my mom likes, you know, who got killed. So it's mostly, you know, it's such a big subject. It's really hard to get some kind of.
No, you've done a fantastic job. Yeah. I don't even know enough about it to ask you much more because I'm just like this is completely new to me. So, but it's interesting. It's really fascinating. Well, we'll leave it at that. I'm going to dig more into this someday. I'm going to have whoever wrote the last book. I'll have him on and see if I can get him to talk about this. But so recently you posted a story, Gunnar and his friend Thord Staten. You posted this on Blue Sky where people could find you now. And there was an element to the story. I don't want to, I'll mention this maybe. I'll have you tell the story because it was recounted to you by, I believe, Gunnar. And then when you finish the story or whatever, I'll bring up the detail because I don't want to like set you up ahead of time. What threw me off here. So tell the story that you received, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, as usual, Gunnar is the one who should tell this story because it's such a it's a good story, and I hope I can do it justice. Really, Gunnar Westrin is a quite well-known photographer and fishing enthusiast and author in Sweden. Has written extensively about fishing and nature. I mean, maybe not famous, but he's known at least.
Yeah.
So
probably, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I mean, since the 60s, he and his friend Tord has been out fishing in Jämtland, which is a part in the upper middle Sweden, in the middle of Sweden, a little bit more up north. And they always stop by an old Sami people camp, a Sami camp, and they hike over the mountain to get to the best fishing lakes around. And this time they had this eerie feeling that someone was watching them all the time when they're walking. Someone was near. There was a presence around them, following them. At one moment, they found, I think they had been, taking a rest or setting up tent for a night. And in the morning, they found tiny footprints on the beach, naked footprints, tiny, like either a small child. I mean, this is out in the wilderness. You don't have kids there. Or just a very, very, very small person. They find this quite creepy, of course, but they continue to hike and they continue to see these little footprints along the beaches, in the grass. As long as they're traveling, this whatever it is kind of both leading the way and following them. They don't see it; they just see the footprints, and they can sense the presence of it. At last, they arrive to the lake, their planned lake, to where they will do serious fishing, and they always hide. They kind of go in a circle, so they've been hiding beers there, beer bottles, so they can have a cold beer when they arrive. But when they arrive, they check the beers was hidden behind a stone or something like that, and they notice that one of the bottles is gone. They can find the label of the bottle floating there, and they found these tiny little footprints around this stone, around this rock. But now it looks like it has shoes, so it's like a tiny shoes,
wow.
So it's an odd. I probably forgot something here now, but it's
okay. So here's the detail that you didn't mention. At some point, one of them winds up naked.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I was reading the story, and I'm like, you rolled over the naked again. It happened here too. This is not normal, right? This wasn't a regular thing. Like, oh, this is how they fished or whatever, or he was known to fucking get naked in the wilderness or anything. This was completely uncharacteristic of this guy. Who, one of them came around the corner and he was fucking naked, right?
Yeah, he was sitting naked, but remember they had walked for days. He was probably really sweaty, and he wanted to, take a swim or something like that.
So it wasn't like he was because what I was like trying to figure out was he like compelled to get naked by whatever the force or beings or whatever these things are, or if there's a rational explanation for that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't know, but I mean, he was naked. I mean, he was sitting on the rock naked, drinking his beer. But if that was because this unknown presence, or just because he wanted to get naked, I don't know. But the thing is, I was thinking about it when I heard it myself the first time, because it kind of stood out. It felt But good. I will ask him about this. Actually, I will get back to him and ask, was there something unusual about this behavior? So,
because like you said, when you suggested, he just took the hike. Maybe he jumped in the water and gotten out and kind of was trying to get refreshed from. Mm-hmm. That's you might ask him. He'd be like, yeah, we did that every time. That's how we cooled off after the long hike. Then it's like, oh, okay. But when I read the story, I was like, what? Wait, what? Wait a minute. Why is he naked? Like, why did he get naked? So, all right.
Well, I don't know how the culture is in the United States, but I mean, in Sweden, people are pretty chill with getting naked in the most unusual places, especially in nature. Okay. Not like anything sexual or something like that, but it's kind of part of.
Yeah, no, I never thought it really was that. Yeah,
especially I think in that generation, it's like let's swim naked in this mountain lake. It's
there you go. Okay.
I would never do that. I want to say, because I'm way too shy.
Same here. Although the drinking naked on the rock, I could see myself finding myself in that position.
Oh yeah.
The drinking leading to drinking naked on the rock, of course. So I wouldn't rule it out.
No, I'm sure it's wonderful, actually. But yeah, I mean, you can see this story, I mean, like two things. Either that it was some kind of spirit or ghost, or a child ghost or something. But I make the connection to my favorite subject, gnomes. The little people, the hidden people, which we have tons of stories and mythology about here in Sweden. But this one is so, I mean, they're kind of a mix between, really naughty children, how they behave, and helpers and protectors. So maybe this little fellow was following them just to see that they didn't get lost or anything like that, if you want to see it that way. So that's mainly why I found it intriguing, because I read in the hidden people, the some kind of gnome story, or tomte.
Right, that's how I interpret it. Yeah. Do you think these little people are, for lack of a better term, interdimensional, or do you think they actually are physical beings that maybe fucking reside, let's say, subterranean, or in some fashion in the physical realm here alongside us, especially in Sweden? Because there's so many in Sweden. Who knows? Maybe there's a population of little people that live underground. It's not it's not crazy out of the question.
No. I mean, I recently talked to an old man who, and I asked him, because he had a close-up encounter with one of them, and we call them tomte in Sweden. Tomte is like a small bearded man, basically, like a gnome. And I asked him, I mean, where and why and everything, and he said that he felt that these gnomes had their physical territory where he met this guy, like they were actually living there. But judging by, I mean, honestly, most other encounters I've read about and written about and talked with people about, they feel way more, interdimensional, or what you want to call it, because they have a tendency to just appear and disappear, and sometimes they're just completely gray. It's like they're merging a little bit with the environment. But one thing I love with several of them is that the gnome always seems as surprised as the witness when they see each other. Yeah, it's like a stare off. They're staring at each other, and both of them are going, "What the fuck?" And it's so fun.
Wow. All right. I never even thought of that, but a lot of the stories that I've heard over the years are like that too. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I often get the question, Fred, do you believe everything you read about and research? And I said, no, I'm quite skeptical. I feel I'm more of an observer. I like people's stories. A good story is always a good story. But I always add, of course, I believe in gnomes. Without a doubt. There's no question about it. There's so many observations out there.
Yeah. There's so many stories in that region, especially, obviously. One of them is the little man. This may have been the one you talked about, where you talked to the guy, the little man of over Calix, and I'm sure I mentioned that. But that was one you said you had recently been investigating.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is a case that shows up a little bit from time to time, even in podcasts, and they talk about high strangeness cases. This was Överkalix is way up north. It's super up north. It's closer to Finland, and to the what do you say, where Finland, Sweden, and Norway meet, it's super high up, super far up in the country. So Överkalix, and you pronounced the name very good, actually. Överkalix, excellent, yeah.
Oh, thanks.
It's a tricky one, so yeah. Well, this was in 1971, and there was kind of like a flap of observation of a small man. They called him the little man, or just a little man, who had like a little man. This creature had a long coat, almost like a fisherman coat. I don't know how to describe it. Really, made from some kind of rubber, and one of those kind of wide hats like fishermen's had. In the old time, you see these old fishermen. Gentlemen in paintings and such, they have this.
Yes, either for the American listeners or anyone pop culture was. I Know You Did Last Summer, right? That kind of guy, that villain, or Gordon's Fisherman for the folks in America who get the fish sticks. That's the look we're talking about.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, I will get to that. Actually, there is an interesting detail on it, but often people didn't really comment on the color of it, except that he had the coat and the hat. He if you look at one of the Witcher sketches, kind of looked like Paddington the Deer. Yeah. Which I find quite amusing. And this guy often had a small lamp or something that emitted a very, very strong light, kind of holding it in his hands. So, one of the witnesses, he actually got really, he got the strong light in his face, and it was really difficult to see. And they also turned sick the day after because of this. You think it was because of this. So there was at least 10 or 11 official observations which reached the newspapers and the investigators. Sometimes people just saw the flash or the light. Sometimes they saw the man without the lamp or whatever it was. But he was always small as a child, standing by the road, behaving weirdly, and then disappearing. This was written a lot about in Swedish newspapers at the time. You can find tons of it, and it's super fascinating. It's such a bizarre story. So there's been, I mean, people have of course come up with explanations to this. There was talk about a very short man living in the area who might have they have mistaken this creature for him, and you could probably, I mean, maybe it was some kind of mass hysteria in some cases. People saw what they wanted to see. But recently, I was talking with my partner who works at a museum here in Stockholm, and he mentioned that he had been talking ghosts with a colleague of his. And the colleague kind of mentioned in passing that, I remember when I was dressed as the little man. And I was like, what? He talked about the little man? And so I interviewed him last week, actually. This guy, he was like 6 years old in 1971. And his sister had heard about the little man from her parents. Shit. Yeah. So they took a coat and a hat, a yellow hat from a gas station, and a quite ugly rubber mask. And they took this boy, put him by the side of the road, and scared drivers for at least, I mean, maybe 15, 20 minutes or something like that. So we suspect that maybe some of these observations comes from this prank. We haven't been able to connect them, but I mean, I'm still going through the material, newspaper clippings, etc. So I'm sure there's one or two who might have reported this little guy standing there by the road. But for me, that's I love that. It's if part of it is a prank, fine. It's it's lovely. It's
the pranks was inspired by the thing, so it's not like it really takes away from the thing. It just captures the frenzy.
Yeah, that's true. Also. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I do love a good hoax. I love a good prank if it's made with some talent and ambition. Fine by me.
Well, that's what I was thinking when we were sort of talking. I'm like, could it have just been a little kid in a fisherman like outfit? So that made me smile when you said that revelation there at the end. There, I was like, oh, yep. That's wild. Now, go ahead.
No, sorry.
Oh, it's all good. Another thing this is really a fascinating subject to me that I've kind of tangentially looked at, but we're going to explore now. You mentioned that you have taken an interest lately in phantom stranger encounters, and I love that stuff. I have a long-standing. So what exactly? We'll start out sort of like, what do you consider a phantom stranger? Because even I remember you were like, okay, what do you call these people? I suggested out of place people. Same idea, phantom, just inexplicable people that are in the wrong place at the wrong time or something like that. But how do you see this phenomenon, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, basically like that. When you're out specifically in nature and you encounter a person that doesn't behave like a person would behave in that circumstance, basically. Which might not seem spectacular at all, but when you. I mean, it's. I guess it's like set and setting there. When you're somewhere and you see someone that doesn't belong there, it automatically turns weird. I mean, most of these things seems to happen in the United States. I mean, I found a lot of them from the United States where people are far out in the wilderness and they see a guy in pajamas sitting in the tree, or dressed in a fancy suit and a travel bag, the classic way. In Sweden, it's way less of these encounters, which is kind of strange because Swedish people are very, very often out in nature. So we should be able to see weird stuff even more. But then again, I guess that many people here in Sweden kind of, if they meet someone out in the forest, they kind of pretend that they're not there. There's a huge sense of privacy. We just, okay, I see movement. Okay, I will walk the other direction. So they never tend to see it. I've been looking around, and most of them I found have a more, in Sweden, have a more kind of ghostly vibe to them. They could be a strange person, or it could be a ghost. And that kind of that gray zone there I enjoy, because to me it kind of adds to the mystery. Can a ghost just be a weird person kind of thing out there? For example, there was someone who wrote to me the other day, because I was asking around, has anyone and he said he was with his family, I think in the 80s, up in the mountains. Kind of feels like the same place as Gunnar and his friend Tord, but it's that kind of mountains. And it was in the summer, and he was out walking, I think, with his girlfriend or family or something like that. And they're up on a mountain, and suddenly they meet a family. And this is far out in wilderness. And the family, I think it was like a mom and dad and 2 children. They kind of dress very, very neatly. They have like sandals. They're they're very properly dressed. This is not any kind of wilderness clothing or hiking clothing or something like that. They comes walking, and for some reason he of course wants to say hi. He probably says hi and offers them to borrow his binoculars. And they just grab the binoculars from him without saying thanks or saying a word. Basically, they take them and they're looking, and they give it back. And then they're kind of floating down the side of the mountain, as he describes it. Yeah, it's like he didn't say that we're talking ghosts here, but they were like floating. And then they disappeared, just behind a slope of some kind. And he couldn't find them. There was no way they could have taken, helicopters. There was no roads nearby or cars or whatever. I have a crazy cat here. I don't know if you hear him.
It's all good. It's all good.
Good, yeah. So for him, of course, this was a very, very mysterious encounter. But it's not as extreme as the one I the stuff I find in the United States with people dressed up in suits walking around in nowhere, basically.
Right.
I would say. Can I
These are like in the wilderness. These are like, for sure. Yeah. These are like in the wilderness. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but my favorite one is kind of like, it kind of feels like some kind of ghost, phantom stranger, different timeline kind of thing, dimensional thing. And it's 2 fishermen. They're out fishing, Henrik and Ulrik, and they're taking the car far out into nowhere. There's absolutely no villages nearby. They're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they get out of the car. This is like, I don't know if it's midnight or even 1 a.m. when they get there. They get out of the car, they unpack their things, they go to a small bridge to go over a river, to walk over a river to where they have their cabin. And when they're standing there, they hear a sound in the darkness. And suddenly they see 2 men come walking along the road, dressed in old-fashioned clothes and big hats, and one is tall and slim, and the other one is shorter and fatter. So they kind of like Laurel and Hardy almost.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and they're completely silent. And they're dragging their feet behind, and they're silent, and they're walking past them. And Henrik and Ulrik, they says, hello, But of course, they get no response whatsoever. and these two characters disappear into the darkness, and of course that's the last thing they see of them. But ever since, when they get back to the cabin, they always lock the door. Usually they don't lock the door. It was such a strange, weird experience to meet these two guys out there. But once again, it's compared to the United States, it's not that extreme, but it's more a creepy experience.
Eerie.
Eerie. Yeah. It is. But I wish. I mean, I don't know if I can say it here, but some years ago, I had a summer of, let's say, psychedelics. So it was fun and everything like that. And 3 times during that summer, while coming down on the psychedelics, I think it was like acid once and shrooms once or something like that. So it wasn't on the peak or anything. It was like, everything is beautiful and nice and everything.
Yeah, it's winding down. Yeah,
it's winding down. It's calm and nice. And during those 3 times, I met the same fucking guy. The first time I met him, it was at the edge of the forest, and he was standing on a bridge with a fishing rod, and he was quite short. I mean, not super short, but he was a short guy, very round, like a round guy, with bulging eyes. Almost like a comic book character, and his
like Peter Lorre.
Kind of exactly like that. Yeah, and his pants was like up to his chest. Like this. If you know what I mean, it's like weird. And I remember walking past him, and he was kind of just stopping, and he was looking at me, and. So I met him 2 other times during that summer, during similar circumstances. Yeah. One time he was hiding behind some kind of electrical, I don't know how to translate it, like a transformator, some electrical box.
Like a transformer box, yeah.
Like
in a park or something, yeah.
And it was kind of peeking up at me, when I was walking by. Yeah, and I was like, and I knew that, okay, this is a physical person. This is not shrooms or acid or something talking. I mean, he is there. I'm not hallucinating.
Right.
I know how it works, and some people say that, of course, he's one of the hidden people, but it's maybe, I have no idea. I mean, he wasn't like a very small, but he was a short, weird guy with bulging eyes and strange pants. Yeah.
Very strange.
Yeah.
It's uncanny. I don't know what to make of that. Yeah.
No. Same here.
Yeah. Did you ever try to talk to him or anything?
No. I think I said hi the first time, but he didn't respond. Because he's watching me, obviously, and it was a very narrow bridge, and you have to pass him very, very closely.
Yeah.
But he didn't respond, I remember, and I think that's why I just decided, okay, he wants his privacy, obviously. He just wants to check around or something. But it's, some people would, of course, if I mention, it's acid or shrooms or whatever, they would say, it's a hallucination or whatever. But it wasn't. It was... maybe I'm reading in too much of it, but it kind of feels like I've tapped into some other reality.
Yeah, I think that's what I think. Yeah, I think the veil was thin, and thinned out, and it was like kind of. Well, you'll appreciate this as someone, as a filmmaker or whatever. That magic hour, that time. It's like the right time you want to film, like it whatever. It's like dusk right before right as the sun's going down, that kind of thing. It's like maybe that's the magic time of when you were tripping out, that it was like the veil is thinnest here, and you're gonna be able, someone on the other side has some interest in it. So it's like, oh shit, I can see Fred. I see Fred. Like the veil's thin on their side too. It's like, holy shit. Yeah. And then, by the end of the summer, he's like, there's that fucking guy again. He's there. Look at, I gotta check him out. Yeah, weird.
Well, But just when it comes to Phantom Stranger, I think what I enjoy about these stories is that they're just on the, they just balances on being, something that could happen, but it's something off. There's something off, and I like that little twist.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
Now you said the American stories are like extreme. So what do you mean? Just people in super not outlandish, but like super incongruous outfits in the woods?
Yeah, kind of. That's what I mean, I never found anyone with a suit on out in the wilderness in Sweden. Right. But if you look at if for example, if you check Reddit or something where people write down their experiences, it's often, someone who is dressed not like they should in a place where they shouldn't be. I mentioned a guy in pyjama sitting in a tree, for example, and because one of the things I read was someone, I think it was a woman who was out in the wilderness, and he was sitting there in the tree out in nowhere, maybe even singing or something like that in his blue pyjama. So yeah, why not? Here in Sweden, I found a lady who was out walking in the forest, and it's maybe more a wild man story, because suddenly she encountered a very, very hairy man. He was a human, but very hairy and with long hair, just dressed in his underwear, and he had a rope, and he threw the rope up in a large tree, and then he started to climb the tree with his rope and disappear. And she said, she ran from this place, I can tell you. So there's there's more, but yeah.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff we could do a whole. we could just the Olaf Baum thing. So one of the things you wrote up for your blog is the werewolf, this werewolf flap, which is really weird too. It's kind of, in a way, kind of connects to that, the hairy man, sort of feral man kind of thing. Which, who knows? I mean, it's entirely possible. We just had Tim Renner on talking about hermits and shit, and so it's like, well, it people could be living in forest and shit on their own now as it is, and so who knows what's possible. But talk about these the 70s, this werewolf flap that happened in Sweden.
I will just give him some food, or else he annoys me. Right now. I hear he's screaming all the time. It takes
no worries.
Okay.
Fred has fed the cat, and now we'll see. Hopefully, he won't be joining us in the conversation anymore. The 70s werewolf flap. So tell me about this.
Yeah, this flap is really a three-part story, basically, because it came in kind of three phases, you can say. It began in November 1972 in Trelleborg, which is a town in the southern parts of Sweden. And it actually began with two women who saw a hairy man in the basement in their apartment building. And this scared them very, very deeply. He looked very nasty and hairy and bearded. I mean, this was the 70s after all, but still, there was something wrong with him. So somehow this story, it reached other people. And within a day, maybe 2 days, the kids in the nearby Pilevalskolan, the Pileval school, started to see a werewolf sneaking around the premises. They saw a creature with a hairy face and long claws. Even some kids claimed that they found its claws, like it's ripped them off or something like that. And this spread, so there was like tons of kids in the school and in nearby schools who claimed to have seen the werewolf. And there were innocent people, of course, accused of being the werewolf. There was like two what do you say, chimney sweepers who was kind of, they have, dirty. So they were followed by a group of kids screaming, throwing stones at them and stuff like that. There was also a guy with a funny hat somehow that was accused of being a werewolf. This went on for a couple of weeks. And here's the thing: the police took it seriously. Maybe they didn't think it was an actual werewolf, but there was like, could it be someone dressed like it, or some bizarre, strange man scaring people, or anything like that? But it kind of faded out after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that, until the end of November, when it happened again in Jakobsberg, and that's outside here in Stockholm. What's interesting here is, once again, it started at the school. It was the kids who saw the werewolf, but this time the observations was actually spread to adults too. So adults saw the werewolf, which, it was kind of mostly kids in general. But here witness reports came in from, I don't know, teachers, but, grown-ups who claimed to have seen this monster lurking around. This flap kind of just also faded away. The police were involved. They checked around, but they couldn't find any evidence for this werewolf running around. And it was kind of forgotten until March in 1973. And then we're going to another place here in Stockholm, Sätra. But this time, it wasn't a werewolf. It was a mummy. And this time, and this time it was, the mummy flap of Sätra was, I would say, much bigger even than the one than the first werewolf flap. This was panic, basically. Not like people screaming and, but it was like, there was lots of writings in the newspapers about this.
Yes,
and people were speculating.
It was a frenzy.
It was a frenzy, yeah. And people describe this mummy as you might describe a mummy, a man with bandage around his head, sometimes his arms and legs and everything. And he was kind of lurking in a forest nearby the school. So of course you shouldn't go near this forest during the night. Here they actually, the police thought this might actually be some kind of some person with psychological problems, some mental health issues or something like that. Yeah. But they never found any. Once again, they never found any evidence that there was actually someone dressed as a mummy running around. But there was some close encounters. 2 kids, now I just remember one of them, Thomas, his name was Thomas. He claimed to have been chasing by the mummy, and he had to hide down in a well, like in the movie It, when it looks up from this kind of well thing there by the road. So the kid was hiding there, and he could see and hear the mummy walk around just above him when he was peeking out. So this was. I guess you can say it was some kind of mass hysteria, but I find it very, very fascinating because it. I know Steve Bergs talks a lot about hyperstition when you for example, you repeat an urban legend or tell a story so many times until it kind of becomes a reality by itself. It's a very striking visual form of storytelling that becomes part of our reality. And so it always, I don't want to get too mumbo jumbo here, but for me, when these people and these kids, they're so connected to their imagination, they're so connected to the playfulness and the scary things in the world and in their imagination that they actually see and feel these things. I really see this as its own kind of reality. I don't want to, throw it away as just mass hysteria or something like that. I feel it's something. It's like when you read about these comic book creators who meet their characters, in bars. I think Alan Moore, for example, met Constantine. Stuff like that. I find that so fascinating, and it becomes so real. You can, when you read these interviews with these kids, it's obviously that they experienced something. They had encounters. But the question is, what kind of, are we talking a physical encounter, or is it something else? and also interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, okay, go ahead.
No, and I'm also fascinated that it was spreading to adults too. Because often these things kind of stays within the group of children or a specific age group. But here also, adults claim to have seen and encountered these monsters. It's a tricky thing because it kind of reminds me a lot about the clown panic, the phantom clowns.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
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 Which I feel is basically the same thing, But to be honest, I don't know. I'm no expert in the phantom clowns. It's basically what I've read,
Yeah, no, it's pretty similar to what you're describing. Like, some kids see it first, and then it turns into like a flap. And yeah. So it's very interesting. It also kind of reminds me, in this tangential sort of way, of the black-eyed kids. Because a lot of people say, that these black-eyed children come to the house. They want to get in, and that's classic sort of vampire thing where they need to be invited in, and people freak out and shit. So all solid black eyes. It's used to hear a lot about those back in the day, but they're not too. You don't hear much about them anymore. But yeah, maybe it's just this sort of recurring, different, like how the UFO phenomenon. People see it over time. It changes how it presents itself. Maybe this thing, whatever it is, it's like now in Sweden, it's werewolves and mummies. In America, it's clowns. In the 21st century, it's black-eyed kids, and so who knows?
Yeah, we had a kangaroo flap in the 90s in Sweden. I don't remember the town now, but people saw kangaroos everywhere, for example. And we have partly probably based on some kind of reality, the submarine flap in the 80s in Sweden, where people saw Soviet submarines everywhere in the water, of course, not on land. But, of course, it's very likely that the Soviet Union sent in submarines into Swedish water at the time. But here people saw them, over and over again. It was like a highway of submarines. We also have I don't know how to translate it, but this was in the beginning of the 80s, where there was 2 schools where people or the kids had some kind of hip injury flap. I don't know how to do. It kind of. Hundreds of pupils got a severe pain in the hip. I think it was a hip or and it was like one of them were, they did surgery on one girl, for example. They didn't find anything, but it was so painful, and people were using what's the English? Supportive,
like a walker?
Stuff like that. Yeah, to be able to walk around.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's like, and then it kind of just fades away, and everything goes back to normal. So it's
that's wild. That's really strange.
Yeah.
Oh man. I'm literally scratching my head right now. I'm like, yeah, that is odd. Yeah. Well, I wonder if there is some kind of running connection there between this thing over, I don't know what you'd even call that. It's not that. Yeah. Even then, you can almost tie it to the Phantom Strangers too, in a way. It's like, out of place. I don't know I don't know who the researcher is, so I won't name drop because I probably get it wrong. But there was someone who was looking at this phenomenon in England that's like phantom child protective services or some shit. It's phantom counselors or something, where these people would come to the house. Theo Pagemas was the guy, I think, who was looking into it. I may have messed up his name. But yeah, he was digging into that. These phantom government child people, counselors or whatever, who'd show up and it was really weird. Yeah, but there was a top of that.
Yeah, that sounds. This actually rings familiar. Maybe there was I read about it years ago or something like that. But it feels kind of the same. Honestly, even Men in Black. It's a
right.
You have the same kind of vibe to it, and this. I personally think that if you experience something weird or out of the ordinary, or something that is strange to you, your mind just gets more open to experience other things, and then you might also see things differently. So I can imagine these two women, they see a hairy, weird guy in the basement, and that story is spreading, and some kids hear it for the first time, and they,
for sure,
suddenly everything grows inside them, the imagination, and suddenly it's a werewolf, and they start seeing the werewolf. But it's a real kind of phenomena, I think so.
Absolutely, yeah. It's almost like one that hasn't even have a name, really. It's kind of like it's very, very strange. Another thing you've been looking into, which you've expressed some real wonderment for, I would say. So I'm like, oh shit, I got to ask Fred about this. Is this island? This, I presume, Swedish island, Åland, that apparently has a lot of, serious concentration of high strangeness, let's say, right?
Oh, yeah. Åland is, we have two big islands outside Sweden. One of them is Gotland. And Gotland was kind of the center for a business 1,000 years ago or something like that. And Åland was kind of the same. Åland is like, it's very, what do you call it? Elongated. It's a long island. It's a long island.
Okay.
Very long and slim, and on the middle of it, kind of fills out the whole center of the island all the way through. You have an area called Alvaret, and it probably means something else, but Alvaret also means, the seriousness, something serious. And that area is absolutely stunning. I mean, imagine some kind of, it's completely flat, but imagine the vibe of a spaghetti western movie, it's like it's not a desert, but it kind of feels like you're far out, on the American countryside. There's no mountains or anything like that. It's a very hypnotic, mesmerizing place, and this area is jam-packed with ghost stories and UFO encounters and dimensional rifts and all kinds of weird things. It's like, I think Öland probably has the most ghost stories in Sweden. Every it's, I guess it's like in the UK. I mean, every house, every farm has their own ghost.
Yeah.
You have one ghost. I think he's called Sven. It's a very Swedish name. This ghost roams Alvaret, this area, and kidnaps children, and of course never brings them back. And at the southern parts of this area, you have a grave mound called Mysinge. Mysinge is legendary. It's a big pile of rocks, a big grave mound, and it's also said to be a portal to, whatever it is. Imagine a portal to Magonia, some place where the others live. So it's said that if you go there at night, you can hear them party basically, and they will travel in and out from this mound. It's also said that time moves slower there. So sometimes when you come with a car or in the past with a horse and carriage, you can't move. You just start to move slower. You can't speed up. Yeah. A couple of the more fascinating things with this area is the dimensional stuff happening. I've talked with at least three witnesses who claimed that they were one of them was driving over this area and got lost, and it's a stretch of roads. It's just straight, for 9 kilometers. There's no curves or anything like that. It's just straight, and he and his wife got lost on this. It was like they were driving, and this guy, who happens to be my uncle, is a quite well known ornithologist, So he knows the area. He knows where to find the birds he wants to listen to and everything like that. So he's been there, I mean, I don't know, countless times, hundreds of times. And this time when they drove, they couldn't find their way. All their typical, the places where they stop, some bus stop, there's some parking along the way.
Right.
Nothing is there. And they just drive and drive and drive until they find themselves, on the complete opposite, realizing they lost like 5 minutes of driving time, basically. Yeah. Then we have a father and son who had such a weird story experience in 2013. They were supposed to drive over on this road my uncle drove on. So they were on the way to it. It's a very, very simple road. This guy is a bus driver on the island, so he knows every part of it.
Right.
And this is in the evening. It's December 21st, which is the winter solstice, by the way, the time where the gates are open, basically, to the other side. Right. And they start to drive, and the classic kind of bluish fog that's on the island turns green-yellow, which they find weird. Soon they realize that there is no road signs. The road signs are gone. They can't find the one single road that they need to turn into to get over to the other side of the island. It's not there. So they just continue to drive, and suddenly they find themselves going downwards, like on a hill. And this island is completely flat. It's still flat, And they think they maybe it feels like they're going a couple of kilometers down. And they're starting to get really, really freaked out. And I believe that the driver, he comes to a place which he kind of recognizes, but the farm that's usually there, it's not there anymore. Instead, it's some kind of weird greenhouse with white white windows.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. And he feels it's something disturbing in there, something evil in there. And they continue to drive and until they get to a pine forest. And they don't really have pine forests on this island, but this is a thick pine forest. He steps outside the car. You can smell the pines. It's a very, very. You can really sense the environment.
Right.
And they're talking about, should we turn back? Should we, what should we do? And then he gets this strong feeling that something evil, something physical is coming from behind them, and they can't go back because that would be very dangerous. And they continue to drive. Until the fog changes back to this bluish color and they see lights in the distance, and they finally comes to a village they recognize, and both are so freaked out over this. I can say that they don't see any really. I mean, the houses they see along the way are dark. There's no lights in them or anything like that. So it's really like he feels that they entered some other dimension or some other reality of some kind.
That's wild.
It is wild. And I mean, I've heard him tell this about his experience a couple of times, and it's like, first of all, the guy never changes the story. I've noticed with people who might, fantasize a lot, or they, but he doesn't add things. He's a very practical person. He's a professional driver. He's been there before. Right. He tells the same story. There's and he was scared shitless. Both he and his son. Yeah. It's a marvelous, very, very interesting experience. Really, it's
fantastic. It's really leaves you scratching your head, wondering where he was.
Oh yeah, exactly. So I recommend it. I mean, if you're coming to Sweden, go to Öland. This island is a fantastic place. It's but don't get lost, of course.
Yeah, no kidding. Jesus. yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I said, you wonder if he's in some other dimension or like some other time or something. I mean, the road was there, but the environment around was different. Because when you mentioned the greenhouse, because at first I'm like, oh, maybe he's like in the distant past, and he's just going down this road. And then you mentioned the greenhouse, and I'm like, wait, now maybe other dimension, distant future. I don't know. It's like
or a different timeline, a darker, more disturbed version of Sweden or something. Or I mean, it is a mystery. I would say it's the most intriguing mystery. And believe me, I've been trying to figure out where he could have taken the wrong turn, or what could have happened. What mistakes could he have done? But I mean, I really can't find anything. It's a very, very simple road to follow. Really can't. You
9
can't
kilometers or something. It's not. We're not talking like a highway here, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very simple, very straightforward. And this happened. But what could it be? I have absolutely no idea. And I found very, very, very few similar experiences in Sweden. You have, of course, older ones where people meeting gnomes and they enter, some different kind of reality in the forest. They get to gnome land or whatever. But this is something completely different. I gotta say.
Right. Like, my imagination's like running wild as we're talking. like you said, like an alternative. Like, what if this is like he somehow went into like Sweden when like the Nazis won, right? And they control all of fucking, and then the whole thing is like, you got to get the fuck out of this dimension, dude, because if you turn around, you're driving back towards like a Nazi patrol and you're stuck in this alternative dimension. You know what I mean? It's like that would be a great sci-fi movie, but that's
it would.
It's like what I'm thinking. Like, it's like, dude, you need to get the fuck out of this timeline because you're going to be captured by some sinister force, and you're going to be stuck in this fucking other world. Another interesting thing you mentioned over on Blue Sky, and what's the? I don't want to mess it up. What's your Blue Sky handle?
Homo Satanis.
Okay.
So it's Homo Satanis, or if you search for my name, Fred Andersson, and you should be able to find me there. So,
wait a minute. It's Andersson. Have I been messing that up this whole time?
No, I was just a bit over. It's under. You said it correctly. So it's no.
Okay. All right. Another interesting thing you mentioned over on Blue Sky is your great-great-grandmother Julia, and you said she spoke to the dead, was psychic, and met gnomes, which is like, I'm so envious, dude, of this whole Swedish world with all the gnomes, man. It's like, fuck, that sounds so awesome that this is kind of, we talked about this when you were on originally last year, just kind of how it's this thing. It's like this commonplace sort of accepted thing that's part of the culture over there. And it's just so foreign, no pun intended, to an American here, where it's just like nobody, there really is no like sort of deep rooted cultural thing like the gnomes here. So it's because I mean, you have a family member that met a gnome. It's like you'd have to really look far and wide to find an American who has a family member, with a gnome story. But it's like not crazy out of the question over in Sweden. So talk about your great grandmother Julia, and it sounds like this is almost. I forgive me, I don't recall the bio background over from a year ago, but it definitely sounds like this sort of the high strangeness has been a part of your lineage, if you will.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, when I first learned about the story and learned more about Julia many years ago, of course, I was highly intrigued. And I feel very connected to her. I mean, she basically looks like my dad. So hopefully I will look like her sooner or later too. She had black hair. She was half Finnish. Lived up there, far up in the north, and she was a psychic. She spent the days talking with the dead. She sat under her favorite tree in the garden, talking to the other side. Wow. She saw ghosts. She communicated with basically everything that wasn't here in this, our own consensus reality. But I mean, the whole thing kind of began Now, to be honest, I might have gotten the year wrong. It was like either 1917 or 1920. Doesn't matter. It's just a couple of years. She was very young, and she was about to start working for the postmaster in Fagersta, which is a smaller town close to Dalarna. Which doesn't say you anything, but anyway, it's in the countryside. So she arrived there with train, and she was so supposed to be met by a guy with a horse and carriage to drive her to the postmaster, where she would work as a maid. But this guy never arrived. This was in the winter, so she decided, okay, I need to find this place. This was way before there was no cell phones or GPS or stuff like that. Of course, it was 100 years ago. So she started to walk, and soon she suddenly saw a small, tiny man in front of her. Really with a classic beard and pointy hat, and she mentioned. When she told the story that she didn't need to run, but the little figure needed to run because his legs were so short. Huh. So it's just so he was running and she was walking, in quite calm way after him, and she followed him a couple of kilometers basically until this gnome turned into a farm. Into a house where he disappeared. And of course, that was the house where the postmaster and his family lived and where she was supposed to start working. And as a bonus, a couple of minutes after, the horse and carriage arrives and the guy jumps out. His name is Gustav. And he's really, really sorry that he missed her. It was been some misunderstanding. And then they fell in love and they had babies. And, my father's side of the family was created that way. So we have a gnome to thank for our existence, I'd say.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and incredible, fascinating woman. She passed away I think it was in 1978. So I was like 1 year old. So I've talked to my uncle and to my mom at the time and everyone else who had met her. She was a very, very special lady. My mom always said that she looked like an old witch with his wart and black hair and everything that, But she's, I would say, for me, Julia is kind of the center of our family. She's clearly the person who she stands out. She had something with her. She had some kind of charisma that I'm not saying we're lacking charisma on my father's side of the family, but she had it.
Right.
Her brother actually moved to the United States and started a family in Minnesota, I think. I've recently been trying to find relatives over there, and I found a couple, and they're very, very old, all of them. And so there's a big family of Salo. The Salo family in Minnesota and Medina County in Sebeka, originally Kusi Salo, which I find, fascinating. Of course, I don't feel related to these people, but it's cool that somehow Julia's bloodline, ended up in Minnesota of all places.
Yeah. Well, it would be interesting, to see if any of them are mixed up in the paranormal at all.
There was a weird synchronicity there recently, because I wrote on Blue Sky that I probably have a solo family in Minnesota in Medina County, and there was one writing to me. She wrote to me and said that we're going to Medina County next week, so we can check around in the graveyards there to see if we can find some of your family. Yeah. So there was like a, if you can call it a paranormal group, but they were, they're using tarot and I guess, all kinds of spirit communication things. So they went to one graveyard, they found some family, but they wanted a specific guy. I think it was Julia's brother. So they went to another cemetery and they found his grave. And in the grave beside his daughter was buried, Lempi. And Lempi was married to a guy named Frank. And it ended up like one of the people in the group who visited this grave was married into Frank's family. For me, that's like, okay, you're going to go and visit a grave that you know nothing about, and you find out that the guy in the grave, his daughter is married to your own family, basically.
Right.
Yeah, so it's some kind of synchronicity there. So I found that quite amusing. Yeah, kind of.
Very cool. Yeah. Interesting.
But with that said, I think Yule is the only one except me in this family who ever had some kind of interest in these kind of things. What I know about, at least.
There you go. Till you hear from some cousin in Minnesota who's like runs Minnesota ghost hunt.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be crazy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Swedish MIB accounts. That's another thing that I picked up recently on your Blue Sky. Someone mentioned you talking about it on a different show, and I was like, oh shit, there's Men in Black accounts in Sweden too, which is a surprise to me because I suppose it does, as we mentioned earlier, it does tie into these out of place people, these phantom strangers. But also it's remarkable in a way because I always sort of associate it with America because it came out of America. This Bender, I believe, popularized it. But so it spread. What's the time frame of this? Is this something that came from America, you think, or is it something that happened much earlier or later, or sort of put this in context, if you will, if you can?
Yeah, I would say that the first. I would say that the first more known encounters is in the 70s, and I bet it somehow sprang from the Albert K. Bender stuff and Gray Barker stuff, because I kind of see the Men in Black phenomena kind of similar, like Phantom Strangers or like the werewolf and mummy flap. You know, you experience something strange, and then you see someone who really doesn't belong there, and maybe you will see something else in that. I jokingly sometimes says that I feel that the phenomenon takes different shapes, and sometimes it can use just a person in the street, or someone knocking on your door to sell something, and the phenomenon kind of uses that image to project some kind of message. To be honest, there's not many, I would say, true Men in Black stories from Sweden. They're kind of more undefined. They're not the classical, with the black suits and weird faces like that. But
do they involve someone who saw something unusual? Because that's sort of the whole. The kind of hinges on that, where it's like they're the follow up to whatever weird thing someone experienced.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Bevan Bertelsen, who recently passed away, he saw a UFO. At the beginning of the 70s, and he talked about it in the newspaper. He wasn't really interested in UFOs before this until he saw this. I think it was a cigar-shaped object or something like that. So he was interviewed in a newspaper, and I think the day after this newspaper came out, a man showed up outside his door. And he lived also quite far away from everything, There was a weird guy who, if I remember it correctly, had a slightly dark skin complex and just acted weird. And he knocked on the door, kind of asked for, which direction should I go? And then he closed the door, and then he felt, what did this guy do out here, out in nowhere? And he opened the door, and of course the guy was gone. There was no way where he could have, hide or gone, for example. He saw it as some kind of Men in Black-ish experience. Jan-Ove Sundberg is another quite intriguing character in Swedish ufology. The problem with him is that he made up a lot of stories. We know that.
I believe we talked.
Yeah. So and he had a couple of experiences like that, and I have a chapter in my book called "Frogman in Black" where he wrote a lot about these kind of observations. But I think you should take them with a grain of salt. I don't know if I mentioned Ante Jonsson. There's a chapter in the book Northern Lights about him where, and I don't think I mentioned this in the book because it wasn't especially known at the time at the writing of the book. But he had a very, very close encounter in 1984, where some weird dwarf-like aliens with hoods was trying to kidnap him, and they were trying to drag him inside a big black UFO. It was very dramatic, and it's kind of real. It's a real mystery, Something clearly happened to him. He kind of fainted behind the wheel in his car, and there was actually an external witness who called the police and said that I see a guy sitting in his car and there's a big black object above the car. You should go there. Wow. There's been something is happening. Anyway, he passed away a number of years ago. He lived at an elderly a care home for the elderly. And when he passed away, his relatives came a couple of days later, and they wanted to get his stuff, his papers and books and everything like that. And when they arrived, the staff told them that there had been 2 men in black suits coming there claiming that there were his family and they would need to take his stuff. So which for me, it feels more like the typical Men in Black kind of story. The thing, of course, with Ante, that the years after his encounter, he claimed to have contact with some kind of alien race. Basically, all the time they took him on trips, and they gave him gifts and all this kind of thing. So he had a very close relationship with whatever this was. So it felt like a fitting end for him that the Men in Black came to. This for sure.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But it's not much more really. It's very. I think, like you said, that the Men in Black is mainly an American thing. And I think it's connected it's so deeply rooted in the American paranoia, and we might not have the same paranoia, the traditional paranoia in Sweden.
Right.
So maybe you can say that Men in Black is some kind of egregores or tulpas created from paranoia also, some kind of a collective creation of some sorts. Here in Sweden, it's not the same thing. We have more gnomes and ghosts, actually. I would say, but I wish there were more Men in Black here. I would love to. I had a weird encounter myself, but I mention it in so many podcasts now. But it was freaky and weird, and I can clearly understand how people react to it because it was so freaky, because it was so unexpected.
I think we talked about this.
Yeah. It was like I'm not going to go into it, but I was at the time.
There's some character.
I was researching Men in Black intensively at the time, and this guy shows up at the door and he tries to get inside, and he says this weird word "Luam" all the time, and we find him outside the balcony, and he's during the night. It's like maybe not a Men in Black, but a weird man.
Right. Yeah. And you wonder if it's like, the whatever the otherness is, it's like it manifests itself in some fashion to like let you know that it's like we know about you.
Yes.
And we're keeping an eye on you, and we just want you to know that we know about you.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of like whatever. Yeah. Very unsettling for sure.
Yeah.
That's when you're like, you want it to be the government. You're like, I kind of actually hope that is like the government trying to spy on me rather than whatever the fuck this very bizarre person.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that was scary times, but yeah, I haven't seen him since, so I guess I'm quite safe now. So
There you go. Yeah, and we actually get super into detail on that story for folks. Go back and check out Fred's initial appearance on BOA last year, because we did about 2 hours there talking about all the stuff from Northern Lights. We've tried to. Well, we didn't need to rehash all the stuff, so go back and check that out, because you get 2 more hours of Fred once you finish this episode. Now, another thing you asked about on Blue Sky, imaginary friends. Very interesting. This kind of also connects back to what we were talking about with the kids. It's like maybe there is some kind of like, you know, I always wonder about kids when they like see beings or ghosts or whatever people, and it's like, are they connected to, you know, is the veil thin for them because they haven't had it thrust upon them by social programming that you shouldn't see these invisible beings, and sort of. I get the feeling that's kind of, in a way, what drove your interest in sort of looking into imaginary friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reason why I started to ask around about it was that I've never had an imaginary friend myself. You know, I can't remember anything like that. You know, and I kind of envy people who had a friend like that, you know.
Yeah, I did not either. So I kind of, that I can recall, you know, I'll have to ask my mom, but not that I can't recall ever like that. Yeah, because you've heard this, you know, we've all heard the stories like this very specific, like imaginary friends who have like whole backstories and personalities and shit that these kids, a lot of people have. I am kind of, now that I'm talking more about it, I am kind of envious because I never had that.
No, it would be interesting to experience that. I mean, those I've talked to, and now I've been talking to friends and my partner and other people around. They often describe their imaginary friend as almost something physical. They can describe this character very, very clearly. It was they saw someone, they saw some kind of a character, and I've always. Not always, but I've been thinking that maybe, I mean, because an imaginary friend is your friend. It can be cheeky and naughty. It can also be helpful. It can be support. It also do the naughty stuff that you don't dare to do. And I was thinking maybe that's what the Swedish gnomes are, basically, because they kind of behave in a similar way, but are more, you know, attached to farms and houses, and you know, so they're kind of like they are a form of imaginary friends. You know, also, you know, but they're
like a natural imaginary friend, or nature's imaginary friend, or something.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course, I find that incredibly fascinating, and it once again relates to that. I feel that our imagination is so powerful, and I say this in every podcast I'm on, that just because I'm saying something is from the imagination, I don't claim it's a hallucination or it's something not real. You know, I feel that the imagination by itself is a very, very important form of reality. I mean, reality is imagination is. I consider imagination the most important thing we have. I mean, outside love maybe or something, but imagination is so powerful. Yes. I've also tried to find more info about people. If you have these experiences with imaginary friends or what I'm about to bring up now, please contact me, because I would love to hear more. Because some I've been talking with, they don't always have imaginary friends, but they have imaginary places they go to. It feels like very, very. It's basically like having a friend, but they're in a different place, a different landscape. Yeah, like they're entering and they can stay there, and it's as much real as an imaginary friend, how they describe it. This, I haven't experienced this myself either, so I have no idea what they're talking about, but it's it's and I wonder if these are connected. Could you meet your imaginary friend inside this imaginary place, or are these separate, or is it the same being, the same entity, the place and the imaginary friend?
Right. Yeah.
I have no idea. I have no answers.
It's fascinating, though.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It really is. And like you were saying, because I'm like, oh, did I? And the more I think about this, if I had an imaginary friend, it didn't make quite any impression on me. Because people, when you talk to people, if they had a fucking imaginary friend, they have like vivid recollection of this. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, I'm not sure if I had an imaginary friend. No, they're like, Toby fucking Mushroom Top. And he was a guy that I knew, and we fucking hung out, and my family was like, oh, and they went along with it and everything. And it's like, they know everything about Toby Mushroom Top and Toadstool. That's the word I was looking for. Toadstool. Toby Toadstool. Toby Toadstool. So like they know everything about it though. So like if you ask them, do you have an imaginary friend? Yeah, fucking Toby Toadstool. And that is vivid. That's like in their fucking minds. It's really wild.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that, once again, I would love to have experienced it myself as a kid. So I mean, I don't want to take acid to see stuff. I want to experience it in a more natural way like that. No, I mean, just kidding. But I also feel. I mean, I'm seriously trying to. I want to connect it with the gnome thing, actually, because I feel there's so many similarities. With how people see them, but I mean the relationship with gnomes are often more invisible or short. They see them just during a short moment, or the gnomes are more working in the background and not directly with you. But I am not sure yet. I'm writing a book about gnomes, and it I kind of stopped writing when my mom got sick and passed away, but I'm still collecting material, to continue to write on it, and it's incredible to look into these stories about the hidden people in Sweden. There's so much weird stuff, so much really convincing stuff, also.
Believe me, as I hear all these stories, it's like there's something happening here for sure. I have no doubt about it either. And to circle back just to the imagination thing, it's really, I don't know, I kind of liken it to like consciousness. I mean, maybe there are philosophers or psychologists who have like looked at that, but to me, it's like, I don't even know if you can really kind of fucking explain imagination. I feel like it's almost like magical in a way. It's like it's a human condition, a human thing that's like I really don't believe. Maybe, like I said, maybe there's some people that have like done studies on imagination, imaginary friends, and they'll give you some sort of thing. But to me, it's like, I don't know. I think it's like something magical that we can't really quite even put our finger on. Because, you think about like these creative type people who like imagine up worlds and shit that then come to fruition. It's like, where does that information come from? It comes from imagination. What is that? It's really, baffling.
Yeah, it is baffling. And I mean, I probably mentioned, Alan Moore's idea space where which is so deeply connected to imagination, is this kind of imagination land where we connect with each other when we build new worlds upon old worlds and extend worlds and characters and mythology, and how amazing that is. Because it's such an abstract thing, but still it's so tangible. It's there, It's like it's something, you take something from your imagination and you can create it in this life, in this reality. It's stunning. I feel it's more magic. I really, you can analyze it how much you want, but it's still magic in the end,
I think so too. Now, as we wrap it up, so how's my friend Klaus Spahn doing? Please give him my best.
Of course, Klaus is doing fine. He retired what is it, 1 year, 2 years ago, and he's living his life as which means that he's more busy than ever. I mean, the guy never calms down. It's like I'm telling him sometimes that, Klaus, you need to, can't you just take a rest? Can't you just do nothing for a weekend? He says, no, I can't do that. And he's he's collecting books. He's collecting books for the archive. He's selling the books. He's saving archives from other collectors out there. And he makes so much. I mean, it does a huge work for both ufology and the UFO archive and everything. He got a very, very nice award recently. He got the award for Sweden's public educator of 2024, which is a big thing in Sweden. It's like, and they gave it to a UFO guy, which some people found very, very provoking. But we know Klaus. He's not bullshitting. He's solid. Yeah. So he's fine. I was actually invited to dinner tonight at this very moment, but I said no. I will be at the doing a podcast, and he said, but you can do it in my office. But I said I don't know how long it will take, and I need to do some preparation, everything like that. So that could have happened, that I've been doing this in his office, but I felt I needed some. I needed to just rest a bit at home here before doing this. There
you go. There might be too much revelry before the show. Yeah.
No. So
I've
fine.
always appreciated and sort of envied in a way, I guess, but it I guess appreciate's probably the better word. But Sweden has just such a great fucking. They've done the Klaus and the folks over in Sweden, the UFO researchers. They've just done such a great job of keeping it together and sort of building this community. You don't necessarily see that in a lot of countries, where there's this rich history of UFO study and sort of not so much formalized, but just organized UFO study. It's really great, and it's great that Klaus and the whole crew over there have kept that archive and everything. It's invaluable, really, because that information is critical, especially from these other countries and everything.
Oh yeah. I think a lot of it is because there is no money in this in Sweden. So so that leads to the people who work with this or do this are doing it because they feel they need to do it because it's important and because it's fun, not to make money, because there is no money to be made from it. I mean, I know very little how it works over in the United States, and conferences and books, and then if you can make a buck or two, but you can't make that kind of money anyway in Sweden. We're doing it because we feel it's so important to protect this kind of history and save this history and witness testimonies, and it's a part of Swedish history and the history of the world, actually, basically, because the archive has a lot of material, as you know. I always compare UFO Sverige and Klaus maybe and partly myself as stamp collectors. We're that nerdy, basically. We're not talking Jeremy Corbell fancy pantsy schmancy stuff. It's like we're real nerds, and the good kind of nerds, of course, not.
Yes. Now I'm guessing it's more open-minded, but so you've got UFO research over there, and of course you have the fucking long-standing gnome phenomenon, culture, if you will. Is there an open-mindedness to the possibility that these are interrelated, or is it kind of because here in America there was even coming up in the 70s, there was a thing, one group was we don't do anything with humanoids whatsoever. We only we only do craft. And then other people, then the APRA was look, we'll take all the alien stories that no one will deal with. And so that so there was kind of like a delineation where it's like, look, we don't want to get into who's behind these vehicles. We just want to get to the bottom of these things first. Then we'll figure out, all that. So I guess I'm just wondering, is there a sort of sense in it has it changed over time? Whatever. Like, is there sort of the idea? It's like, look, there's the UFO phenomenon. Then there's also this known thing. Or was it like, oh, these might actually be kind of connected?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's we have there is an open mind that it is connected, because I mean often the gnome sightings and gnome mythology and everything like that is very, very, as you know, it's very similar to the UFO phenomenon and humanoid observations. It's like, it depends on what background you come from and what perception you have on reality. I mean, if you're born with science fiction around you, might see aliens and spaceships, and if you're disconnected from that and you've been raised on a farm, you will see gnomes, or the hidden people. I think I mean personally, and I think many in UFO are very open-minded to that. But again, UFO is also sometimes we're accused of being a skeptical organization or even a debunker organization, which is completely wrong. Yeah, you won't believe what you can hear here, which is strange. But UFO is so based in science and an investigative way of looking at the phenomena that we can't explain something unexplained with something other unexplained. Right. Yeah. But the openness for both gnomes, for example, and UFOs and humanoids are, I would say, very, very open and
it makes sense.
Accepted,
Right.
And I like that. That's good.
Yeah, because it could all be connected. I think it is ultimately all connected in some way. We can't quite figure it out yet, but maybe we can't. That's sort of the whole deal. Like, we just can't we're two-dimensional, and this is three-dimensional. We just can't physically comprehend it right now. But eventually,
I often say that I'm fine with having mysteries. I don't always need answers. I think mysteries is something that drives us forward. We're chasing something, and it's fun. That's it. It's fun.
Before I wrap up, I don't know if I asked you this last year when we talked, but I am a big Bigfoot buff. Are there ever any Bigfoot reports or sightings? Ever any instance of a Bigfoot in Sweden?
There is. There was in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, there were a couple of observations around the mountain range Kebnekaise, where witnesses saw, at least in two instances, big white ape-like creatures up there. Yeah, like kind of like snowman or a white Bigfoot or something like that. And there was one in the early 70s, I think, where a woman and her children encountered some big hairy creature beside the road. I don't remember the details now. Then there,
on the spot with that one. So
yeah. So there is, but there are not many. They're not
right.
And
few and far between.
Yeah, and I want to say that if you search for Bigfoot in Sweden, you will always get a couple of stories from the 80s where there was a flap, I think in Hälsingland or something. There was some girls skinny dipping, and there was a Bigfoot looking at them, and there were some smelly Bigfoot at some outside the house, and etc. There are a couple of them around the same time, and I just want to say that those are fake. Those are made up by the journalist himself. There's no reality to them. So if you read them and you feel, oh, this is cool, remember they're just someone's imagination to sell a newspaper, and they have turned into some kind of fact over the years. But outside of that, you have a couple of interesting ones.
There you go. All right. I bet you there's like YouTubers out there who are like the skinny dipping story from Bigfoot with Sweden, and they don't know any better, and they hear it online, and then they're like, that happens a lot, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Now you said you were working on a new thing now, so the what's next. It's time for what's next for you. Don't drop out, folks. So I was like, so the website Fred Andersson 2 S's.se. So fredandersson.se. Northern Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden is the book. As I said, dig up last year's conversation with Fred for an in-depth exploration of that. But what's going on next with you? You're like research all kinds of stuff. I really and I want to thank you. You bumped our show with Nathan Isaac, and you remind me a lot of Nathan because you've got all these different irons in the fire of interesting things you're looking at: phantom strangers, imaginary friends, these gnome cases. You're looking at all kinds of stuff, plus working on this new project. I think you said with BBC Sweden or something along those lines, or a Swedish version of a BBC show or something. So, what's next for you? What are you working on? What can folks look for here in 2025 and beyond?
Well, like I said, I'm in the middle of this BBC production at the moment, and it will be aired in the autumn somewhere, 4 episodes. We're going to do a deep dive into 4 interesting cases. There will be ghosts and other weirdness, not necessarily just ghosts, no UFOs though so far. It's fun to do because I can do real research and get paid for it, which is always nice, I mean, I've done some more commercial ghost hunting shows, and the research there is very, very light compared to this. So this is super fun, and it will be a great show. I am very, very. Once again, I'm proud working with it because I like to push paranormal boundaries in Swedish television. I want to do this, and I want people to understand that there is more to the paranormal in Sweden than just the white lady in the castle or whatever. There's more interesting stuff. Outside of that, I'm working on a gnome book very, very slowly, but I've written like 11 chapters.
Oh, nice.
With some really interesting things. I think I remember I probably said last year that, I will have it done this autumn, but then my mom went and died. So, it will happen when it happens.
It can wait.
It's no hurry. I've also started to write a novel because I'm in that certain age now when you need to write the big novel. So every morning before I go to the office to do research, I sit and write, and it's a high strangeness themed novel. I'm writing it in Swedish at the moment because I feel kinda that I'm forgetting my own language. I just need to write in Swedish for a while. But I don't want to say more about that because then it will never happen. Right. So I'm already regretting it here now. But that's it. I'm looking forward to the summer. I'm looking forward to go to Norway. I'm looking forward to be outside in nature. That's basically it. I want 2025 to, even if this world is burning at the moment, I really want to have the best year myself, as good as I can, at least.
Yes, I'm in the same boat. It's try to ignore the news as much as you can, but it's hard these days for sure.
It is. But then it's good to have friends as you, as AP Strange, as everyone else around this community, which is like amazingly creative kind of people. And every time I feel uncreative, I feel flat and boring and gray, I just turn on Binnall of America or the AP Strange show or Where Does the Road Go, and all those kind of shows. Just explore. That's awesome. Yeah, that's how it is.
I can't thank you enough, man. It's been an absolute blast. I'm so glad we got to have this conversation, and just know how much you are appreciated, Fred. All my buddies in the we all love you, man. We're always talking about how awesome Fred is. AP and I were exchanging messages today that I said I was going to have you on the show, and you bring so much interesting information, and it's a very. And forgive me, folks, this sounds a little xenophobic. It's like I wish more researchers in other countries would learn English so I can learn more about their shit. But I wish that were the case with so many people, and that's why it's such a valuable resource. You have so much information that otherwise none of us would know about. Like none of us, everybody who's listened to you on these shows and read your books and heard these stories, and follow you on social media, none of us would know about this stuff if not for you. And you're such a valuable resource and so appreciated and loved and really loved, man. So, yeah, thanks, brother.
Thank you. Damn, I'm getting teary eyes here from the nice words, really.